It says live on my end, so.
Yeah, so we're probably live. So I'm going to welcome everyone. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest, who I am meeting for the first time, because if you watch regularly, you'll know that yesterday we had a bunch of questions about thyroid. And I'm like, wait till tomorrow, because we actually have an expert who is going to be talking about the lifestyle for a healthy thyroid. He's not only board certified in endocrinology, but he's also board certified in lifestyle medicine. So he's a double threat. He's also plant-based, and I have never even heard of a plant-based endocrinologist until I heard him on a podcast. Please welcome Dr. Soham Patel. It is such an honor to meet you.
Likewise, and thank you, Chef AJ, for having me on your platform. And this is a topic that I encounter in my daily practice, and it is very widespread. So that's why I chose to, speak on what we can do to have a healthy thyroid, because prevention is better than cure. And um, the talk today, we're gonna it's there are so many aspects of it. We can go for hours and hours, but because of the time limitations, I'll be focusing more on what we can do to prevent things from getting bad as far as thyroid conditions like hypo and hyperthyroidisms are concerned, overactive or an underactive thyroid. And then in the question answers, I may be able to add some more insight. But as Chef AJ mentioned, I'm double board certified for endocrinology and lifestyle medicine. I also am certified in internal medicine, so triple board certified, and I have my practice here in Tampa, Florida. And I really try to combine lifestyle with endocrinology, because the majority of diseases we see in endocrine practice are, to a large extent, from not appropriate lifestyle choices. So let's delve in. We're going to talk on thyroid, as you guys know, and it's a butterfly-shaped gland, right, sitting in the on the neck of your thigh, on the base of your neck, and it has two lobes, as you can see on that little picture in the insert, and has a connecting area called the isthmus. Sometimes people may have a third lobe in the middle called the pyramidal lobe, but usually it's two lobes with a connection called the isthmus. And that one gland produces so many different, produces one hormone with so many different actions. Actually, it produces one more hormone too, but for this discussion, we'll focus on the thyroid hormone. And the thyroid hormone can have effects throughout your body. It has effects on normal functioning of the brain, of your heart, healthy skin, proper gut function, bowel function, proper liver function, and nervous system. So it if it's off, it can really make you feel not healthy. And again, just a disclaimer, making sure that this is an informational talk for education only. This is not meant for treatment or diagnosis. Please consult with your physician or a healthcare professional who is knowledgeable to help you with your individual treatment and diagnosis. So the first thing that we talk about for lifestyle is what type of foods. And this may look like a very busy slide, but it's a very colorful slide, and that's what our food should look like, the rainbow. Now I'll break it down. So as you see on the slide, the right half of the slide has different colors of fruits and vegetables, and the fonts are a little small, but basically each color that you see listed there, we need that in our meals. And it doesn't have to be that we need all those colors in a single day. As long as we're eating the variety of colors throughout the week, we are getting the phytonutrients and the variety of fiber that we need for a healthy body and a healthy thyroid. But 8 out of 10 Americans are not getting enough color in their daily meals. And the percentages are listed there, but anywhere from 69 to 83% of people do not get enough of different colors. So red, blue and black, purple, green, yellow, or orange, and white. Those are the five broad categories, but making sure you're getting some of those colors. So when you go for shopping at the market, make sure you get each of these five colors in your weekly grocery. So that way you'll be having that in your meals. And it is not necessary to stress and worry about getting exotic fruits and vegetables. Whatever is locally grown and whatever you can get, preferably organic if possible. And the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, has a very good list each year that they put out, which is the Dirty Dozen versus the Safe 15. So the Dirty Dozens are the ones that you try to buy organic, and the Safe 15 are the ones that you don't necessarily have to spend more to buy organic. If you want to buy everything organic and you can afford that, that's great. But that way you can be more judicious with your spending and still get the benefit. And on the left side of the screen, as you see, is what kind of plate we want to work towards eating. Now that plate is I picked it up from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and they have nice information handouts. And as you see, half of the plate is filled with fruits and vegetables, and 1/4 is healthy, wholesome grains. If you do eat bread, it should be a multigrain bread, not just brown bread or whole bread, because when you read the label on the bread, it should say whole this grain, whole that grain. Every grain that is listed on the bread should say whole, and that's the type of bread you want to eat. And luckily now we have multiple brands that make those type of breads, because more and more people are asking and looking for that. So it is fairly easy to get a multigrain bread, which could be part of your diet maybe once or twice a week. But there are a variety of grains like oats, brown rice, quinoa, different types of rice like black and red rice, different millets. Millets are grains which are typically grown in India and the Southeast Asia. But millets are very beneficial. There are 5, 6 different types of millets. We have quinoa from South America. So there's a variety of grains that we have. But the key is to make sure that you're having the variety and not just focusing on wheat. Unfortunately, the way wheat is grown in US because of widespread use of pesticides and the way it's hybridized, we have so much gluten content, and the leaky gut that we get from the pesticides and all the other toxins that we get can really put your immune system in an imbalance and create thyroid trouble. So for the purpose of thyroid, trying to avoid processed wheat, and if possible, getting some ancient grains like farro, which is wheat but in its whole form, um, that you have. So again, not just relying on wheat as the only grain, having varieties of grains, and then when you do have wheat, try to avoid processed and refined wheat products, but focus on things like farro, which are ancient grains for wheat, and having 25% of your meals from varieties of beans and legumes, and a handful of nuts and seeds. So you get different proteins, you get different variety of fiber, you also get healthy fats from the nuts and seeds. The key with nuts and seeds is they're high in calories. So you got to be judicious with them and not go crazy because they are healthy, um, because you can pack in a lot more calories in a small amount. And if you look at the plate, you really see there are no macros listed. Usually, when you look at plates, they'll say, protein and fat and carb. Nature provides all those three macros and vitamins and minerals and fiber, very key ingredient, fiber and water in a combination in all those plant foods. And then when we are thirsty, we drink more water. and a good, a combination of herbs and spices, depending on whatever your, cultural background and knowledge. Experiment with spices, and one at a time, trying to, get the benefit of those. You don't have to be a master and master all the spices all at once. Don't feel overwhelmed to do that, but pick one spice, learn more about it, start using that, and then slowly keep learning more and more. And that's how we can, in a matter of few weeks, a few months, you can really get a handle on how to add more spices in your diet. But as you see there on the plate, every food that you see there has enough protein. There is protein coming from beans and legumes, there is protein coming from whole grains, there is protein coming from vegetables, and there is protein also from fruits. And not a big source, but for example, if you eat a cup of blueberries, you get 2 grams of protein. If you eat a mango, you get 2 grams of protein. As a matter of fact, when people get this allergy testing done on their skin, the protein that is used to check for those, is actually the protein from each of those foods. So when they check for a strawberry allergy with a prick test on your skin, they're actually injecting protein from the strawberry. So I think people don't think of fruit as a source of protein, and I'm not saying that it has a lot of protein, but what I'm saying is when you eat the variety of foods and focus on the right proportion of things, you get enough protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and fiber, minerals, vitamins, and water, and that promotes a healthy microbiome. The gut, that the bacteria that we carry in our gut, they're close to 100 trillion. So if you look at number of cells, we are more microbial than human. And if we don't provide them the right variety of fiber coming from these plant foods, then we do not support a variety of bacteria in our gut, which we need. So the more variety, the better the microbiome, and that's what leads to better health. There is a little different way also to look at what type of foods to eat, which foods to eat in abundance, which foods to eat in moderation, and which foods to work on avoiding. So the green light foods are ones which you can eat as much as you like. Again, starchy and non-starchy vegetables, um, different beans and lentils, seasonal fruits, varieties of whole intact grains, limiting gluten as much as possible because of the effect on the immune system and the thyroid. Learning more about herbs and spices and including them in your routine, and lots of mushrooms. Mushrooms are very high in antioxidants, and they also have vitamin D in them, and adequate water intake. Those you don't have a limit on. You eat till you're full and you drink water till you are not thirsty. A note on the water is make sure you drink enough water at a time rather than sipping water every 5 minutes, because when you sip on it, every time you drink water, the body has to adjust the sodium balance in the blood, and that literally creates a bubbling effect in the brain because the sodium level goes up and down. It's a very micro effect, but you want to try to drink enough, 1 or 2 glasses of water when you feel thirsty, so that the body utilizes what it needs, and then it gets rid of what it doesn't need through the urine, and it doesn't have to keep adjusting that sodium balance every few minutes if you keep sipping on it. The foods that you want to eat in moderation, because primarily they are higher in calories, so if you overdo them you can actually see weight gain, but they do have healthy nutrients. So you have different varieties of healthy fats and vitamins and different minerals from different nuts and seeds, um, avocado or coconuts or olives. My focus again is whole food, so I would rather have olives on my salad than drench it with olive oil. I would rather have few shreds of coconut as a garnish than put everything in coconut oil. I would rather eat, quarter avocado or maybe half an avocado 2 3 times a week than drench everything with avocado oil. Because when you take the fiber away, you lose a lot of nutrients, and you make it concentrated fat product, which especially except coconut, avocado, olive oil, and all the other oils, they have very low smoking point. So when you use those oils and heat them up, they start creating more free radicals, which is not good for you. So try to use them as natural as possible and in a smaller amount so that you don't get the excess weight effect. And the foods that you're trying to avoid are the foods that primarily come from processed foods and animal sources. And on the very top, especially, so this is also good for the overall health, but primarily for thyroid health, if I can pick on two food groups that are very damaging to the thyroid, it's dairy and processed foods, because dairy has all this casein and hormones and more pesticides and contaminants that triggers and damages the thyroid. And the processed foods, like all the refined grain and oil based products, have different additives and color dyes and preservatives, which are again very damaging to the thyroid. So processed foods and dairy are the two big things which can really trigger thyroid inflammation, and trying to avoid those would be the first step. And then all the other animal foods, white or red meat, poultry, fish, eggs, again, they don't contribute any fiber. They don't have any fiber whatsoever. They are loaded with more heavy metals and toxins and pesticides. Even compared to conventional fruits and vegetables, you will get a lot more pesticides and hormones from animal foods. And the animal protein causes more inflammation in the body. And you also get all these pathogens and toxins that you don't need. So again, people work differently with changes, but if I had to pick two things, then processed foods and dairy would be on the top, and then slowly working on adding more whole plant foods and working your way down on the meats and eggs and poultry would be kind of the second, third step. Very important for thyroid health equally is getting adequate rest and working on proper stress management. In today's time, especially with this last year, the whole world is upside down. um, we need we need to make sure that our body doesn't feel that stress 24/7, because when it feels that stress, it starts pumping all this cortisol and stress hormones, which will, one, lower your immune system, and number two, create varieties of health issues and affect the thyroid. So, we I put a picture of a baby there. When the baby goes to sleep, they stretch, they turn up and down, really relax their muscles before they fall asleep, and then when they wake up, they do the same. Having a routine where you can do a minute or two of that will help you get better sleep quality. Creating a sleep buffer zone for maybe half an hour at least, or hour before bedtime, where you don't expose yourself to any blue light or the electronic media distractions, and rather maybe focus on some journaling that helps you unwind from the day and helps you de-stress, listening to some relaxing music at the same time, and then taking a warm shower can actually help you to get into that routine where your body thinks, okay, when you start doing those things, it's time to fall asleep and slow down. Because if we are going in 100 directions and then suddenly we want to stop everything and fall asleep, it's not going to work out. People have so much insomnia because of what they do in the evening time. So really working on having that buffer zone where you avoid the blue light and create a routine which conditions your brain over time to think of relaxation and falling asleep. Focusing on some form of meditation and yoga practice, which again helps you get more fresh air and also helps improve your parasympathetic tone, which lowers your stress hormones. So Deep breathing and meditation, simple techniques. You don't need to spend hours and hours, but you got to do it consistently. What I usually tell my patients and friends and family is 2 minutes of deep breathing, where you do the 2-1-4 technique. So 2 seconds breathe in, 1 second hold, and 4 seconds breathe out. 2-1-4, and doing it for a couple minutes in the morning. You can do it again if you have a long commute to work. Do it on your way to work while you're driving, and then in the middle of the day, do it for a couple of minutes at your lunch break. Do it again when you're driving back from home, and then at night when you're trying to fall asleep. Now, if you consistently keep doing this on a daily basis, your body gets a break from that chronic stress response, and the parasympathetic tone keeps getting higher, and that lowers the cortisol, and it allows you to get more oxygen. Meditation could be something as simple as just focusing on your breath when you're doing the deep breathing and trying to stay more centered on your breathing rather than thinking about future or the past. There are many types of meditation, but that's the most simplest to start with. Um, and exercise, what I mean is having activity. Sitting is the new smoking. There is more and more data that is piling up that is showing that when we sit long hours, we actually create effects in the body which are very similar to what would happen from smoking. So if you have a desk job that you are there for hours together, make sure every hour you just stand up and loosen up your legs, or if you can, just for 30 seconds go around the block around your office and come back to your desk. If you cannot leave your desk, then just make sure you stand up and move your legs back and forth for a few minutes before you sit down. And if you can have more breaks, then have more breaks, but make sure that you have some activity. If you're doing nothing, start with 5 minutes of walking. If you're doing 5 minutes, go to 10 minutes. If you like biking, go for biking. If you like a sport, go for playing that sport. But having some form of activity a few minutes every day, that's the starting goal. You don't have to think that you need 45 minutes every day. You will reach there. But if you keep thinking about 45 minutes every day, then it's not going to start. You need to start with 5 minutes and then slowly work your way up um, to where you get 30, 40 minutes of daily activity. Again, stressing on the sleep hygiene, like I said, you have to have a buffer zone. The key point that I did not mention earlier is making sure that you do not have any distractions in your bedroom. You should not keep any TV or any electronic devices in your bedroom. The phone should stay at least 10 feet away from you. Preferably, Wi Fi should be turned off at night if possible so that you're getting lesser electromagnetic field exposure. Definitely not next to your head, and making sure that you do not do things in the bed, because you want to condition your mind and brain to think of bed as only place for resting and getting intimate. There should not be any eating in the bed, watching TV in the bed, reading in the bed. Whatever you do it at a different place. Once you fall asleep, you put the book down or you put the pen down if you're writing something, and you come to the bed to fall asleep. And earlier from the aspects of what type of foods to eat, what I would also add is when to eat, because when we eat till going to bed, we create a situation where our liver doesn't get time to detox. So having at least 3 hours of no food before bedtime is a good routine to create that environment where the body can work on cleaning itself during the sleep. Because if you eat something and go to bed, then the liver and all your digestive system has to pull a third shift and work on digesting that food, which that energy should have been actually utilized on detoxifying the liver, repairing any damaged cells, letting your brain and lymphatic system detox itself. All those functions get put on the back burner because you have food to be digested. Uh, Common thing that I see again, people take a lot of supplements. We do need some, but not a laundry list. Again, trying to get your nutrients, vitamins, and minerals from food is the key. So, trying to get things locally and organically grown as much as possible, as I mentioned earlier. But three key ingredients for overall health and thyroid. B12 for overall health, B12 is made from microbes, and the microbes in the soil and in our gut are getting depleted because of pesticides and antibiotics that have been widely used. So having a methyl form of B12 in a under the tongue sublingual form, either 1,000 micrograms every day or 2,500 twice a week, whatever works for you. And then getting your levels checked to make sure you can keep your B12 level between 600 to 1100. The range is pretty wide, but you want optimal levels, and 600 to 1100 is that optimal zone. So get your levels checked and make sure it's monitored to be in a good range a couple times a year. Vitamin D is very important for thyroid because of its role on the immune system. So it's important for bones and muscle health. It's important for a lot of gene function in the body. It can affect up to 2,000 different genes in the body. It's actually a pro hormone. It's not a vitamin. It's a pro hormone. But the effect on the immune system is to create a balance where your allergy and infection control arm are in balance. We don't need infection control to be low and allergy response to be high. We want them to be in balance. And low vitamin D typically puts you in that state. So when you get your vitamin D level up, it lowers your body's autoimmune response. And that's where you want to start with 5,000, but make sure there is no calcium added in it, just 5,000 units of D3. There are many plant-based, brands available. And then getting your level checked once in springtime and once in fall to see where you are. You want to keep a level between 50 to 80 on your vitamin D. That's the optimal. The range is 30 to 100 for normal range, but optimal is between 50 and 80, 85. So making sure that D is in a good range and not just on the fence or just technically normal at 30, 32. And take it with food because it absorbs better with food. So make sure you take it with a bigger meal. In terms of thyroid health, iodine, yes, we don't have the deficiency that people had back in the 40s and 50s, where you would see a lot more bigger goiters because iodine got added into salt and things like that. But there is still a lot of subclinical deficiency. And number one, getting your iodine level checked. And if your iodine level is in the mid normal range, then you're good. But if it's not, then eating some clean source, of seaweed, like wakame or nuri, um, which is high in iodine, but making sure it's a clean sourced seaweed because you don't want other heavy metals in it. And if you don't like that, then getting a good quality of liquid iodine supplement, where you're getting somewhere around 150 micrograms worth of dose. Usually it's one or two drops in the water that you can put, and get your level checked so that you keep it in the mid normal range. Specifically also for the thyroid, selenium is also a very essential mineral that it needs for normal functioning of thyroid. So selenium supplements are available, but I rather focus on whole foods. So I usually personally also take one Brazil nut a day, and that's what I also tell my patients because they're loaded with 150 to 200 micrograms of selenium, and it also has vitamin E, it has zinc, it has other healthy fats. So it's a nice package, and only one. I think for some people, if they are a bigger build, may handle two, but starting with one Brazil nut a day. And the benefit of the Brazil nut is also because if you get selenium supplements, if you overdo it, you can easily cause liver and kidney damage, which we don't want. But with the Brazil nuts, because of the package of the whole foods, you don't get that damaging effect as long as you eat just one a day. And seriously trying to stay away from these thyroid support supplements that are available. There are hundreds of them, but close to 80% of them have been found to have T3, which is active thyroid hormone in it, which is not even put on the label. And also quality control and other contaminants is a big concern. And many times these thyroid support supplements have actual, animal thyroid extracts in it, which again, there is no way to quantify it. So you get a lot of, damaging effects. So maintaining good D levels, iodine and selenium, specifically for the thyroid, and then for overall health, having a good B12. Those are pretty much the supplements one needs. We don't need a list of 10, 12 supplements. The last aspect, which I'm going to try to cover, and then so that we have time to go over some questions, is detox. We are bombarded with hundreds of toxins in our air and water and food and the furniture, everything, even some clothes. So we got to detox. That is not an option. We have to detox. Now, you don't need a special detox retreat that you will spend thousands of dollars. You can do that in your daily routine. So, number one is reducing the intake of toxins. So, sadly, the tap water is not really that clean as it should be. And so, you want to have a reverse osmosis filter, um, either tabletop reverse osmosis or a filter under the sink, depending on your budget. And you can add fresh things into it. So you get infused water. So you can add, mint leaves in it one day. Then you can add some lemon slices or orange slices, or one day you put some ginger slices, or you can put some slices of cucumber. So you can flavor it differently every day and get a different flavor, but please don't put all this chemical flavors and artificially flavored beverages, which adding more toxin and acid into the body. Sweating every day, because when we sweat we detox. So having some activity that allows you to sweat. Sauna is kind of a expensive way to get a detox if you buy on a sauna, or you can use that at a gym. But you don't need that. You can get it by just having some form of outdoor activity that makes you sweat. Some form of green detox smoothies or juices that you can do couple 3 times a week. I've listed some common foods which are very good in detoxing. So celery is very good for thyroid and overall body. Cilantro or parsley. Some people like cilantro, some people like parsley, but either one of those are also very good in heavy metal detoxification. Ginger, mint, lemon, green apple, more so from adding antioxidants and getting a little better taste, because if you just have celery, cilantro, and just leafy greens, then you may not like it. So the green apple adds more antioxidants and gets you a nice taste. But making sure the green apple is a small portion, not a lot, because you don't want too much apple, which will then add the sugar and no fiber if you're going to make a juice out of it. And intermittent fasting, like I said, you want to at least have 3 hours of no food before bedtime, and trying to achieve at least minimum 12 hours of no food every day through the night. And if you can, go for 16 hours of no food. So if you can have a routine where you can eat between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. or 11 a.m. and 7 p.m., making sure you're eating in the middle of the day and not later at night, and then have 16 hours of no food overnight, that would allow your body to focus on detoxification. So any efforts you can put to allow your body some rest from having to digest food will definitely benefit with detoxification. Avoiding and cooking, in plastic and all this non-stick cookware, because they are loaded with chemicals which we don't need. So stainless steel and good quality um, glass cookware which doesn't have any lead in it. And then if you need some pan to surface to cook on, then iron cookware would also add some iron in your food, but at the same time doesn't have all that added chemicals. So making sure you're working on changing your utensils step by step. There are a lot of flame retardants which are applied as chemicals on coating on furniture, in the paint. So making sure you become more cognizant and don't go for any coating on your furniture, because those flame retardants specifically have bromides and halides, and those two minerals elements can actually compete with iodine. And that's where people get more issues with the thyroid, because their iodine uptake by the thyroid is being blocked by those chemicals. And the last two things, making sure you have a part of your day where you're not surrounded with electromagnetic field radiation, or you're really limiting the exposure. You may not be able to completely avoid it, but you get it from laptops, computers, from your phones, from microwave, from your Wi-Fi router. So making sure your Wi-Fi router is at a part of a house that is away from your bedrooms. Uh, you can also make sure that you keep your phone 10 feet away when you sleep. And if you can turn off the Wi-Fi at night, that limits how much radiation exposure you get. Um, and having some time either in the day or in the week where you stay away from electronic media completely. Spend some time in the nature. It could be in your backyard, it could be in a state park, it could be in a garden. Go somewhere that takes you away from technology and gets you in back with nature. And when you walk bare feet on ground, or you work in your yard with your bare hands, you actually do grounding. You ground all that negative energy from the EMF into the ground, and it allows you to also detox very efficiently. So I'll end with these two quotes. There is a quote from Ayurveda, which is the ancient Indian way of health and healing, where if the diet is wrong, the medications are of no use, and if the diet is correct, then the medications are not needed. And Hippocrates has said, we all of us have the natural healing force within us. All we need is to give it the space to do its job. And I've listed my social media handles. So I know it went a little longer, but I hope I was able to get in a lot of information.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I apologize for not mentioning you were also board certified in internal medicine. So you're actually a triple threat.
Yeah, that's, I don't do primary care as such, but majority of my endocrine practice, with all the diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, all that stuff, is pretty much like primary care, but so that's that. And yeah, I'm sure there are questions.
Oh my gosh, there are so many questions, Dr. Patel, in the chat, but I do like to give preferential treatment to people that took the time to write them in. So we'll do these first, if you don't mind, and then we'll get to as many as the chat. The people in the chat, you guys have to realize that my feed disappears because I'm streaming to multiple places. That's why when you send them in, it stays there. Before we get to the questions, I love your story of giving up dairy, because you were raised vegetarian, and in Indian culture, there's often a lot of ghee, there's often a lot of dairy products. Is that correct?
Yes, I was raised a lacto-vegetarian. Ghee was not a big part. I mean, I had it in my, meals here and there. But the biggest thing for me was milk and yogurt. I used to have 3 glasses of milk a day. The day started with milk, ended with milk. And I used to eat a lot of yogurt. My mom would make yogurt at home. And it would be a big part of that, and I would finish that in a few days. And I did that quite a few years, a few decades actually. And my grandfather, who followed naturopathy for many years, and he used to share books about Dr. Furman and Dr. Shelton, and Dr. Barnard, and tell me about things from dairy. I somehow kept blocking him mentally. But finally, when I was in my endocrine fellowship, I started looking at those data myself, and I reached a point where I said I need to not keep fooling myself, and so I quit dairy overnight. And in 3 weeks, I lost 20 pounds. Just like that. I was not exercising at the time. So I said, let me check it the other way. And I added back a cup of plain Greek yogurt again for lunch every day for a week. I gained back 5 pounds. I stopped again and it came off again. And it's been 6.5 years now that I've been dairy free.
That's amazing. Well, for a lot of people, because of that addictive component, I think dairy can be very hard for them to abstain from.
Yeah, the addictive component from the casomorphins, the cultural conditioning that you may have, whatever your family traditions and food patterns. There are so many factors that which lead to that. So it becomes challenging for many people to change that. So but in terms of thyroid, dairy is huge. So any steps you can take to work on cutting back on that is definitely
Like you
beneficial.
mentioned, it's just very calorically dense. It's about 1,600 calories a pound. So for people wanting weight loss, it's a wonderful tool to
Yep.
use. Great. So we're going to get to the questions, but guys, realize he can't give you direct medical advice, and some of these are very specific, but you can book a private consultation with him. If you live in the state of Florida, you can see him in person, and then he can do telemedicine. If you don't, he can still do a consult, but it would be more in the aspect of a coach. He could not dispense medical medicine and things like that. So there's a difference, but some of these are a little bit more general. So that'll be, I think, very easy for Dr. Patel to answer. And the first one is from Melissa. Can you ask Dr. Patel to talk about the sources of iodine if you don't use salt and you don't like sea vegetables?
Yeah, so I'll just share what I do. We get this iodine liquid from Sprouts. Sprouts is a chain of a farmers market. And we get their Sprouts brand of iodine liquid, which is 150 micrograms in a single drop, and it also has some kelp in it. So I typically put a drop in the water once a day.
Great, thank you. Also, guys, when you write really long ones, I do shorten them just because we have some time to consider. So Jan says she's interested in how hypothyroidism can be the cause of macrocytic anemia and the relationship of the two.
So thyroid hormone, like I mentioned, and again, there are so many functions. So one of the functions of thyroid hormone is to stimulate the production of red blood cells from the bone marrow. It's a very important factor in that process of the red blood cell getting matured. And if you are hypothyroid, then that can affect that process. And that's where you see the anemia from the lack of thyroid hormone. Many times people have hypothyroidism because of Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition. And along with that, they also have an issue where they are not able to absorb foods properly. And many times they may have frank celiac disease. And that combination can also affect the absorption of nutrients like B12 and iron, and that can also lead to anemia. So there are a few different pathways where people can get anemia with hypothyroidism.
Great, thank you. Shane says, my thyroid is low, my TPO is 828, normal should be under 60. What foods can help? I'm taking one Brazil nut a day and eating a vegan SOS-free diet.
So number one, SOS free, so sounds like it is whole foods, but I would definitely emphasize it should be whole foods, plant-based eating. That's great. Taking the Brazil nut is great. Maintaining enough vitamin D is the second part of that, because Brazil nut and the selenium definitely helps to lower the antibody. But if your vitamin D is running low, then that would create a hindrance to getting that effect. So making sure your vitamin D level is above 50 on the lab, and taking enough to get it there would actually help to bring the antibody down. And then the two other parts that, as I mentioned in the talk, is working on your sleep routine, making sure you're getting good restful sleep, and some form of stress management, because I've seen over and over again is where people are eating plant-based and they're taking Brazil nuts, but if their stress levels are high and they're not able to properly address those, then it can really trigger the antibodies to go up.
Wonderful. Thank you. Melody says, would you please ask Dr. Patel, is iodine still necessary if the thyroid is considered dead and non-functioning, and yes, the person is on levothyroxine?
So if you had let's say you had Hashimoto's, which is inflammation of the thyroid for 20, 30 years, and your thyroid gland has been completely damaged. And when you do an ultrasound, you can see that a damaged thyroid gland will be very small in size. It will be way smaller than the usual size of the thyroid on an ultrasound. And it will be really, having no viable thyroid tissue left. If that's the case for you, then adding iodine is not going to be meaningful. And you are going to be on the thyroid hormone replacement. But if you, let's say you are 20 years old and you've just been told to have Hashimoto's and your antibody is high, then making sure you take the dairy out from your diet and avoid processed foods and work on getting your vitamin D up and adding the Brazil nut can actually prevent you from that process going on and prevent you from a lifelong of thyroid hormone replacement, because you took care of that head on. But if it's been completely damaged, then yes, the iodine doesn't help. And again, before you start with iodine supplementation, I think I mentioned, but I want to emphasize again, make sure you get your level checked first. If your level is below mid-normal range, then you can add. But if your level is already in the mid-normal range, you don't have to add iodine.
Terrific. Thank you. Laurel says, can hypothyroidism cause high systolic blood pressure readings, even if diastolic is lower normal? She says she's 62, been eating a whole food plant-based diet without sugar, oil, salt for 8 years and has lost 50 pounds, but has never been able to get off her blood pressure medication. And she also wants to know, this could probably be a really long answer, what causes hypothyroidism?
So the first part of the blood pressure and the hypothyroid. So when you have hypothyroidism, it can affect the health of the lining of the arteries, and it makes it more, it makes it less elastic. And that's where you have this high systolic blood pressure, the top number. And that process may take longer to improve, many times before you start seeing improvements in your blood pressure when you start eating whole plant foods way of eating. Hypothyroidism, why that happens? So the majority of hypothyroidism happens because of inflammation, either processed foods that inflames your immune system, making antibodies which attacks your thyroid, or dairy, which again affects your gut, which leads to immune system activation, which leads to attack on the thyroid. Or the one thing that I didn't focus specifically, but I did cover it briefly, is heavy metals. So mercury, people who have mercury, silver fillings in their teeth, 50% to 55% of those fillings are mercury. And every time you eat or drink some warm food, it evaporates that mercury into your bloodstream. So you are inhaling and getting the effect of that mercury. So if you have any silver fillings in your teeth, then making sure you find a good dentist who knows how to get rid of it in a safe manner and get rid of those fillings, so you can avoid that, because mercury binds to the thyroid cells and mercury can elicit a very strong immune response. So when when that mercury sits on your thyroid, the immune system just attacks the mercury and then in process starts attacking the thyroid. So those three issues cause that autoimmune, processed foods, dairy, and heavy metals like mercury. cause the autoimmune activation, which is the majority of type. And then I also see, some patients who have diabetes, and diabetes comes from insulin resistance. And long years of insulin resistance can start messing up with hormone functionings of other hormones. So high insulin then starts messing up with thyroid functioning. It can start messing up with sex hormones. So when you start seeing effect of insulin on thyroid, that can also lead to hypothyroidism. So typically, if you can reverse insulin resistance with whole food plant-based way of eating and lower stress and good sleep, I can get those patients off the thyroid medication sooner versus if it's from the Hashimoto's or autoimmune destruction and it's been for a few years, then that cannot be completely reversed.
Thank you. That's terrific. So this will be like a compilation of what I'm seeing in the chat, and it's versus sent in, but it's basically people are asking if somebody already has thyroid disease, can you speak to whether they should be avoiding soy and gluten and eating a lot of greens?
So like I mentioned earlier on the plate when I was talking about the foods, you want to go away from eating just wheat as your source of grain. And the wheat that you do consume should be, more unprocessed, so things like farro or bulgur wheat, organic bulgur wheat, but really working on minimizing wheat and adding other grains, wholesome grains, so that you're getting lower gluten content. And what was the second part of your question?
Is soy, gluten, and greens, do people have to worry about how much they eat of those three things if they
Yeah.
already have thyroid disease?
So soy, again, there is a common discussion. I've seen that, soy is bad. Now the processed soy protein powders or the fake meats made from soy, all those stuff, yes, avoid those. But the wholesome forms of organic, non-GMO soy foods like the actual edamame beans or the soybeans, or organic non-GMO soy milk, or organic non-GMO tofu or tempeh. Those are the five food types of soy that I do recommend because it has overall benefits for the health and thyroid. So you don't have to necessarily avoid them, and you don't have to go overboard with those. But having it part of your some form of your soy, organic, non-GMO, wholesome soy foods as part of your weekly meals is healthy. The cruciferous vegetables, they're only problematic if you're only eating those and nothing else. Let's say you're eating 2-3 pounds of kale a day, raw kale, 2-3 pounds every day, every week, then that can be a problem. But no one that I know typically does that.
Great.
So when you eat cruciferous vegetables, making sure you're eating a variety, uh, cauliflower, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, radicchio. And if you cook it a little bit, if you lightly steam it or saute it, it clears that chemical that can be a problem for the thyroid. So you do not have to avoid cruciferous vegetables. They are beneficial, they're loaded with antioxidants, but you should not eat to point that you're just eating like 2-3 pounds of those a single day. And you should make sure that you slightly steam them. Again, it's not going to be bad if you eat a raw kale salad or a few pieces of broccoli raw, but keeping the balance.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. So I listened to you on Dr. Lori Marbus's podcast, and you said something that really intrigued me because I've been vegan for 44 years and whole food plant-based for, I don't know, probably half of that, and SOS free for about 15 of those. But I also follow a low-fat diet, and you said that 10% of calories from fat is the magic number for improving insulin sensitivity. And I'm good friends with Robbie and Cyrus from Mastering Diabetes, and that's what they teach too. So I'd love for you to speak about that because so many people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic go on keto diets, which are like really high in fat, and that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, keto, actually, I mean, we have data. We have head-to-head trials now done by Kevin Hall at NIH. That were published last year. He did one study and then he published another this year. which clearly show that you lose more weight eating whole plant foods versus eating keto. You, on average, you eat 700 less calories. I think 650 or 700, somewhat in that range, less calories eating whole plant foods versus eating keto. And also, the previous study he did clearly showed that your insulin resistance gets worse in a matter of few weeks. So yes, you may see weight coming off, or you may see your body not needing much insulin if you're on insulin with diabetes, if you eat keto, but that's only momentarily. Over time, that insulin resistance get worse. And I've seen people still eating keto and their sugar numbers are starting to go up and their insulin requirements are going up because your body is not designed to handle that much fat. If you were completely healthy, you can probably have 15% of your calories from fat and it would not be a big problem, anywhere around 15. But when you're looking at disease reversal, when you're looking at reversing insulin resistance or reversing heart disease, then you want to work on achieving that 10% target because that's where the tissues and the liver and the muscle cells can really start improving insulin resistance.
Great, thank you. Roberta said, is it okay to eat a salt-free diet if I have hypothyroidism, as long as I'm having some sea vegetables a few times a week?
I don't suggest salt-free, but I don't recommend going crazy with the salt either. Um, so our salt consumption is 10% of what it used to be 10 years ago. We are not salt-free, but what we do is we use the Himalayan salt, the pink salt, or sometimes we use the rock salt, which has different minerals in it. So it's not just sodium chloride, but it also has other minerals with it. And if you use the salt towards the end of the meal when you're cooking it, instead of putting salt in the beginning, if you add salt at the end of the meal before it comes to be cooking, then it needs a lot less amount and it has more flavor. So if you add it at the end of the cooking, you need a lot less salt and you don't need as much, and it has good flavor. So you don't have to be necessarily salt free. Yes, you can get it from sea vegetables. Uh, so it's your choice, but I don't think there is a need for being salt free completely, but there is definitely a need for limiting the amount and trying to have a more mineral rich salt than just table salt.
Great, thank you. Patricia wants to know if Hashimoto's can be reversed with a whole food plant-based diet. Does it depend how long somebody has it and whether or not they've been on medication?
Goes back to what time in that process we capture that. So if it's when I see patients in very early in the process of the Hashimoto's and their thyroid numbers are just starting to go high and they are not completely high, and if they start making those changes, I typically see that levels improve and the antibody starts going down. And eventually we can normalize the antibody and then keep them away from needing medications at all. If it's been a few years, under 5 years, I think there is still value to working on improving as much we can. We may not get 100% improvement, but we can improve it from getting worse. So sometimes I may be able to keep patients at a steady dose of 50 micrograms, which is not the full dose, and they may not need any higher. But if it's been 20, 30 years and it has been completely destroyed, like I mentioned, if the ultrasound shows the thyroid is shrunk and the tissue is, damaged, then that cannot be reversed.
Wow, thank you so much. So I hosted a summit last year called the GI Health Summit. And one of the things I noticed is that there seems to be a lot of people with IBS that also have hypothyroidism. Is there some connection between the two diseases?
I think the key goes to your gut health and the fiber, because people who don't eat enough fiber don't have the right microbiome, and then they don't have the right microbiome leads to more autoimmune conditions and thyroid health issues. And having thyroid abnormality can also cause a lot of gut issues because you need adequate thyroid hormone to have a proper bowel motility. So you could get constipation or diarrhea depending on where your thyroid levels are. So they are definitely interconnected, but I think, but the key goes to what's your gut health. I think, and you may have known Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. He's a GI doctor in South Carolina. I came to know about him only 6 months ago. Um, but he talks about how people even with IBS symptoms, if they go about adding fiber steadily, let's say they are allergic, they can handle legumes, but if they start with 1 spoon a day every day and then slowly add few more spoons and then half a cup and then 1 cup, then the microbiome knows that this is the food that is being supplied every day. We need to be enough amount, enough numbers to handle that. And you don't get as much gas as you would get with if you pound yourself with 2 cups of beans when you're not eating any. So for beans and legumes, I usually tell patients to start slow if they're not used to eating that while they're working on cutting back animal foods. But it goes back to the gut health.
Terrific. Thank you. So a lot of people, when they first hear about a whole food plant-based diet, if they're diabetic already or pre-diabetic, they go, oh, I can't do that. I can't eat carbs. I can't eat potatoes, rice, and beans. So, and I'm wondering if you ever experienced that with your patients, but I'm also wondering if that's true, how did Walter Kempner reverse diabetes feeding his patients white rice, fruit juice, and sugar? Those are all refined carbohydrates.
Yeah, I mention that all the time when I'm trying to explain that a 96% carbohydrate rich diet with 0.5% fat and 3.5% protein, which is what Dr. Kempner's protocol was. You can still get the weight loss and the improvement in sugars because your body is not getting that excess fat, and the insulin machinery can work very efficiently. So, and it's been ingrained so much into the psyche from the social media, electronic media, and the messaging from physicians and dietitians that people are portion control and avoiding rice, potatoes, and beans, which again there is value to so if you're eating rice, making sure it's brown rice or red rice or the black wild rice, those are more nutrient dense, and having the proportion right. So you don't want to have a whole plate of rice with few specks of beans on top. You want to have maybe half a cup or 3/4 cup of rice with lots of vegetables and beans. So you get to enjoy the rice, but you also get to get those fiber-rich foods, which provide you more steady blood sugars. Same thing with potatoes. Eating it as a French fries, yes, that's a problem. But eating a baked potato without lathering it with butter and cheese, or having a baked yam with a serving of black beans and some salsa, those things are loaded with nutrients. They are loaded with fiber, and as long as you don't add excess high fat foods to it, the glycemic response is actually very, very good.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Patel, I'm in my 60s, and when I grew up, women had the onset of menarche at 17, 15 was even considered young, and 11 or 12 was considered really young. Nowadays, little girls, sometimes I've heard of them getting their periods as young as 6 or even 8. And I'm wondering if all this early onset puberty is an endocrine situation.
It's an endocrine situation, right on the money. It's an endocrine situation. There have been lots and lots of studies which show that endocrine disruptor chemicals, which is plastic and BPA and dioxin and PFAS and all these long, abbreviations that I cannot even pronounce properly, that we find in the soil, in the water, in the food, and all this xenoestrogens that we get from BPA. Um, those things, processed foods, high dairy and animal food consumption. And if you look at America, let's say before World War II, yes, people still had their pot roast or maybe roasted chicken once or twice a month, but that was a special meal. Every day was still fruits, vegetables, and beans. Whatever grew in the backyard is what you got to eat. And there was a huge family to support usually. So beans were the staple for most of the families. So from there, you have all this, what has happened is all the industries which were created to support the World War machinery had to be repackaged. So all those chemicals started introducing into our farming and our food in our environment. And that's where we're surrounded with this. So our precocious puberty is becoming precocious puberty and PCOS are issues because of endocrine disruptors, chemicals, and increased intake of animal foods and dairy, and all this processing, which leads to further insulin resistance.
Yeah. Is PCOS often seen more in people that are overweight or obese?
80% of PCOS is related to weight, but I also see 20% of my PCOS patients not necessarily be obese or even overweight. They may be lean and they can still have PCOS. So yes, common notion is weight, but it can also happen without, lean PCOS is also there.
But for the 80%, it might behoove them to get down to a more ideal body weight. So terrific. I'm so concerned about these little girls that get their periods so young, because then they can get pregnant young. And isn't there a problem when sexual maturity precedes emotional maturity?
It does. I mean, it's a big problem. So at so many levels, physical maturity, emotional, mental, all, aspects of our being are just being, messed up. And I do want to mention that, if you look at cultures, Japan and China, again, before all the processing and food scenario that changed in the last 40, 50 years, those populations used to eat tremendous amounts of soy foods, like the tofu, the tempeh, soy milk. And even, we have trials done with soy foods with women with breast cancer, which show that eating organic non-GMO soy foods is actually beneficial and improves your outcomes and increases your life expectancy, even with breast cancer. And same thing is noticed with the reproductive health, that women who have organic non-GMO soy foods in their routine early on would have lesser appropriate menarche and also lesser symptoms during menopause. But if you try to eat them when you're going through very aggressive symptoms of menopause, it may not show you as much benefit. But if you've been eating that throughout your life, then you will actually have lower symptoms during menopause.
Wow. So many people, as we mentioned, that are diabetic or pre-diabetic fear carbs. They're afraid to eat potatoes, rice, or beans. I can almost understand that, but they're still afraid of fruit. I mean, fruit does not cause diabetes, correct?
It does not. It is protective against diabetes. Now, the issue that happens with fruit is if someone is completely inflamed and has high degree of insulin resistance, and if they try to eat a piece of fruit, initially their sugars will go up. So they'll say, oh, they see I ate that banana and my sugar shot up in 200s. Well, they're not wrong there because they're still so inflamed. And the insulin resistance is so bad that that fruit is reacting that way. But I would mention this here. Even if your insulin resistance is not bad, but if you combine your fruit with cheese, which is commonly recommended to diabetics, eat your fruit with a piece of cottage cheese. That is a sure recipe to get your insulin resistance high and your sugars will shoot up. So I typically tell if someone has a very high A1C, about 10, and they have a lot of weight and insulin resistance issues and the liver numbers are off, just so that I don't bombard the liver with more fructose, which is the sugar from fruit, I ask them to eat low glycemic fruits like the berries, the kiwi, apple, those type of foods. And then as their levels are all getting better and their liver is getting improved, then I let them go on to the tropical fruits like banana and mango and papaya and chiku. Chiku is the name of a fruit that we call it in India, but I think it's called zapatos. That does grow in Mexico. It's a brown round fruit with a black seed in it. But so you can eat those tropical fruits gradually as your liver gets better and the insulin resistance goes down.
Terrific.
I kind of follow the approach that Dr. Furman does with this. and he goes for low glycemic fruits first, and then eventually you can add more tropical fruits. But I think Robbie and Cyrus, they say fruit is fine. But again, if you limit the fat to 10% or below, then I think you can handle a lot more food. But for a patient who is just trying to understand all these new changes and try to limit the fat at the same time may be a challenge for them. So that's where I start with the low glycemic fruits first, with the vegetables and beans, and then slowly graduate them into all the types of fruits.
That makes sense. We know that both iodine and selenium are important to thyroid function, and there's no food, to my understanding, that contains both of these minerals. Is there a test that people can take to see if they're deficient in either of those minerals?
Yeah, so you get a blood level checked for iodine, and that typically tells you where you are. And again, you want to try to stay in the middle of the normal range. And the same way, you can also get a level check for selenium. But I usually don't go for selenium level checked. I just go for eating the Brazil nut one a day.
And that's the only food that has selenium.
Other foods do have, but Brazil nut is so much packed that you can get enough that you need for the whole day from just one.
So one a day. Nice. What is insulin resistance, and what's the difference between primary and secondary insulin resistance?
So primary is where insulin resistance is the primary process leading to that, and secondary is where what Cyrus and Robbie have described, where you have insulin deficiency, so you do not make insulin, you're type 1 diabetic. But if you keep eating low fat, not low fat, but if you keep eating high fat, high protein, and low carb, adding all that animal protein and fats, over time your body and liver starts getting insulin resistant. So you need more insulin to do the same job. And over years you gain more weight and your sugar numbers go up and down. So that is the secondary insulin resistance, because you still need insulin. Your body doesn't make it. But because of the foods you've been eating, your liver gets clogged up and the muscle cells also start getting the same effect. And now you need more insulin than what you needed 10, 20 years ago. Primary is where that is the initial process. So the cells in the liver and the muscles are not designed to store fat. The only cells in the body that are designed to store fat are the fat cells or the adipose tissue. So when you start consuming foods which are higher in fat and you exceed that 15% mark on the total calories from fat, your liver starts piling up more fat inside it, and then it starts interfering with the insulin receptor. So the insulin binds to the receptor on the liver cell, but it is not able to do all the chemical reactions which it should be doing inside it. And so the glucose doesn't enter the cell, it stays outside. And that affects your, sugars. Initially, your pancreas senses that and produces more insulin and compensates for that, but it reaches a point where you are not able to make any more insulin. You're making the maximum amount and you're still eating the same way, which keeps making your insulin resistance worse. And buildup of all that fat in the liver says, I cannot just keep this fat to myself. So the liver starts sending the fat through the blood into the pancreas, into the muscle cells. So the pancreas's ability, the beta cells that make insulin, when they get deposits of triglycerides in them, it lowers their insulin production. And when that fat goes to the muscles, it lowers their ability to process insulin and take up glucose. So now you have a double effect. You produce less insulin because of buildup of triglycerides in the pancreatic cells, and the insulin that you produce is not working like it should at the liver and the muscle cells. And if you don't intervene, then you probably reach a point where your pancreas gets, it has no surviving beta cell left. All the beta cells that make insulin get destroyed. And at that point, you are on insulin. You have to, your cells cannot grow back. But that takes, years and years. So there's definitely a lot of missed opportunities where people can, even after 10, 20 years of diabetes, they can still reverse insulin resistance with the right food and lifestyle.
That is so encouraging. And thankfully, there's doctors like you now that are helping them. I don't know if you can see the comments, but Sharon said, this has been the best guest yet. So wish I had access to such a knowledgeable and modest doctor. So people are really enjoying you, Dr. Patel. I'll just maybe a couple more questions. I don't want to keep you, but I thought this was interesting because so many people say they can't lose weight because of hypothyroidism. And my understanding is that you still can. It may be slower because I used to be obese and I lost all my weight during a period where I was hypothyroid. But the interesting thing is my hypothyroidism was actually diagnosed by a dermatologist because the only symptom I had was I actually grew a beard, a white beard on my face and arms, which she called lanugo. And then they tested my thyroid and it was really, really low. Have you ever seen that happen?
So what happened was you actually had an autoimmune, reaction where vitiligo is the technical term. But what happens is these autoimmune antibodies are attacking the cells in your skin, and those same antibodies can also trigger the thyroid dysfunction.
Yeah, it was so interesting. So it was really vanity that brought me to to do something about it. So last question, people are asking about HRT. Do the benefits outweigh the risks?
I don't think I'm the expert because I don't understand all the, pros and cons. But what I have understood so far is there are some women who really have a lot of issues, and the quality of life that they are having because of that definitely, is not worthwhile. So in that case, it is beneficial to replace, hormones, um, versus go through that, sleep disruption and all that issues, the mood changes and all that. And I will make a note here is that if you transition into HRT through the menopause without having a gap in between, it is better than not having it for 10 years and then after 10 years you're going to go on HRT, because what happens is as the estrogen levels go down, the health of the arteries changes. It becomes more not elastic. And if you introduce hormone replacement after few years, you can actually cause more inflammatory response, and that's where people got the blood clots and the heart attacks and all that. But if you transition into it with the HRT without a gap, then your arteries don't go through that change, and then eventually you can slowly, come off of that. Um, I'm not in the favor of just saying blanket everybody needs it, but case to case basis, I think some women it's more beneficial than harmful because of the impact it is happening. But it should not be a blanket thing that everybody gets it. And again, as I said, if you try to add organic, wholesome soy foods early on in your life, then you will go through a lot smoother transition than if you don't have it and if you try to do it later when you're going through it.
Okay. I said last question, but there's so many people. This will be the last question. Thyroid nodules. People are asking what causes them. Can they be reversed maybe with water fasting? Does it matter the size? Should they get biopsies?
I think it's a whole different discussion. I cannot cover all the aspects of the thyroid nodules in one.
In 2 minutes. I understand. Well, thank you so much. I've taken up so much of your time, but you seem like a very knowledgeable and compassionate doctor. And how can we support you? Would you like us to follow you somewhere, or do you have any books or anything like that?
I started writing a book, and then I wrote 30%, and then it's there for almost a year and a half now. So I need to get back to my routine to finish it. But as I said, I put my social media handles there. I do post things periodically, and then if you are in Florida, I can see you in person. But if you like to have a one-on-one coaching, then I can do that through Zoom sessions as a coach, not a physician. And my email is info@cfpen.org. Center for Preventive Endocrinology and Nutrition is the name of my clinic. So that's what the CFPEN stands for.
Great. Well, thank you so much. You've just been a wealth of information.
I'm glad I was able to share that with your group, and thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. And thanks to all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when we will be having a wonderful cooking demonstration by Chef James Sant. Thanks again, Dr. Patel. Be well.
Thank you.